Hello, my fellow vigilantes. I'm your host, Omagnus Batman, and I have an excruciating schedule, overwhelming schedule that I'm not able to dish out as much reviews as I wanted to. So what I'm going to do, I did this before, but I'm going to do a bundle review of the films that came out last week, and that is Don't Breathe 2 and Free Guy. Also, I have a screening event that I've been invited to. I have of the Candyman. I will have an early review of the Candyman coming up real soon. Also, I went to a pre-screening yesterday for a film called The Night House. I will have an early review for that film as well, so stay tuned for those films. So let's get going with Don't Breathe 2. Don't Breathe 2 is a sequel to the first Don't Breathe that came out in 2016. What else? 5 years ago. Wow. And this movie has a basic premise. It's all about this war blind man who has a new daughter, and this new bad guys, these meth heads, are terrorizing him and his daughter, and he has to protect his daughter from these evil bad guy meth heads. And we practically have the movie Don't Breathe 2. In the first act of the movie, we have our hero dealing with these meth heads, trying to protect his daughter, his new daughter. So we have some decent action sequences in that first act. And then that first act, I was compelled. I was enjoying myself in the first act, revolving around the action sequences. And I thought the performance was done well. I thought the actress, the little girl who played the little girl, I thought she did a really good job with her role. And as I was enjoying the first act, it got into the second act, and then the film sort of loses its momentum. One of the things I like about the first act is they had some of the elements that I liked in the first film, like the claustrophobia feel. Like, you don't know every turn the character makes, there could be like a jump scare, or the blind guy could attack you from behind. You don't know where this guy is attacking you from, because he pretty much knows the whole entire area like the back of his hand, despite him being blind. Then the film loses some of its momentum, where some of the elements that you like in the first film doesn't really happen in the second act. And that's primarily due with they switch to a different location. Because in the first movie, you have these teens that break into this house with a blind man, and the blind man's dealing with these teens, and he's basically wiping them out, pretty much. And in this movie right here, this character kind of takes a step back on. Now, I realize that it has to make sense. It has to make sense, because if you have Stephen Lang's The Blind Man be OP in this movie, it removes some of the tension in this movie. But in this movie, I just found myself a little bit bored and not really invested into the character as much as I wanted to, because there are certain elements in the first movie that I know about this character going into this movie that I just didn't really feel anything. And that primarily, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, in this movie, he got his ass kicked throughout the movie. I understand why he would get his ass kicked. And these are bad guy meth heads, but yet he's a war vet, but yet I don't really feel like he's a war vet. I just feel like he's just a regular blind man. But I guess you need to have that just for the film to have its tension. But outside of that, the film barely even had any tension. Like I said, in the second act and the third act, that's where the film switches to a different location, and it just takes away from the great elements that you like in the first film, like the claustrophobia feel. Like, you no longer feel that in this movie. Had a different dynamic approach for Stephen Lang's character. In the first movie, he was an evil character. He was the antagonist. And now in this movie, he is a protagonist. And as I was watching the movie, like during the second act and third act, I just couldn't follow the main character, because this man was a rapist. Those of you who have seen the first movie, spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil the first movie. Those of you who have seen it, this dude was a rapist. He had like a teenager, strapped up full of semen in his basement, pumped up with semen, little needles. And I'm like, and this film is trying to justify his actions, or maybe they're trying to justify or trying to redeem his character. But, I don't mind if a film does that. I just don't like it when the film tries to attempt to redeem a character. It takes away certain aspects of the character to the point where he becomes a boring character. Yeah, so pretty much in this movie, he was like a boring version of himself. Then around beginning stages of the third act, it switches its focus on this family dynamic of these meth heads. And I just got bored out of my mind. I just didn't really care anymore. And as I was watching this movie, I couldn't root for the main character. I was like rooting for the main girl, but she didn't really have like a huge role. She was mostly like a little girl damsel in distress throughout the whole movie, because the blind man has to protect her. But really, I was just watching this movie, and I was just trying to figure out, the film never justified its existence. I just felt like this was a cash grab. I felt like it was like an unnecessary sequel. I'm going to have to give Don't Breathe 2 a Val Kilmer Batman. This is a forgettable film that I just don't really care for. So that is my review for Don't Breathe 2. Now here is Free Guy. Free Guy is a movie that stars Ryan Reynolds, and this movie is all about a bank teller named Guy who discovers that he's actually an NPC inside a brutal open world video game called Free City that will soon go offline. And Ryan Reynolds plays an NPC man whose entire life is a lie. And with that, I had a feeling that this will appeal to the video game groups, as well as providing entertainment to families. And as I was watching this movie, I really enjoyed the performance of Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, at this point, it's a formality. I said this a lot in a lot of Ryan Reynolds movies. He's basically playing himself throughout this movie. And he does a good job doing it. But yet, there are some times in this movie where he kind of switches away from his standardized, Ryan Reynolds style. And I actually found his character to be compelling and actually funny and humorous. And the humor revolved around his character work, and it was consistent throughout the movie. And also, the co-star, Lil Roy, his friend in the movie, he also did a good job with some of the humor. Some of the humor did land in this movie. I did find myself enjoying the humor. So the film switches from the real world into the video game world. And when we go to the real world, we focus on two other characters played by Joe Carey and Jodie Comer. And those two are pretty much like the video game designers. And as we are going into this movie, the creators of the game are noticing that this NPC is starting to have a mind of its own, and the creators of the game are thinking to themselves like, okay, is this like a glitch of some kind? And that's where the villain of this movie comes in, played by Taika Waititi. I think I got the name right. I'm not good with names, so Taika Waititi, yeah. So Taika Waititi, he plays the villain in this movie, and there's some times that the villain worked. Sometimes the villain doesn't really work, but his character just was over the top. I just felt like his tone, his over the top kookiness didn't really mix with me. Some of his humor didn't really land, and I just felt like his performance, his over the top performance, was out of place. As we progress into the movie, there are some great moments, there are some jokes, and you will find yourself laughing. And the story was consistent. Like, the story really blew me away. There are times where the film doesn't really stay consistent on the story plot points, and it does go off course just a little bit, just to flesh out certain character moments or to drop one-liners for humor. The story does a good job of making you feel the other NPC characters on an emotional level that I really was buying it, and I was just like captivated at the edge of my seat. This film has some stellar action sequences, and it has a few cameos from a few gamers and a couple of great cameos from certain big list MCU stars. I'm not gonna say which, but once I saw them, I was like, woo! I instantly fell in love with this movie, and I just really enjoyed it from start to finish. Like, yeah, it has some nitpicks here and there, but for this movie, I was just entertained from start to finish. And I did like the performance of Ryan Reynolds. I thought he really did a good job with some of the humor, and also the writing revolving around the story plot points was consistent throughout from start to finish. And I didn't have any huge issues other than the main villain played by Taika Waititi. With all of his humor and action, the film still maintained the heart and emotion that was involved with the characters. It was a ton of fun, especially with the few cameos that appeared. It was hitting on all cylinders. So yes, I'm going to give Free Guy a Christian Bale Batman. I really did enjoy this movie, and I think you will too. So check out Free Guy. And that's my bundle review for Don't Breathe 2 and Free Guy. So have you seen Don't Breathe 2 and Free Guy? What are your thoughts on Don't Breathe 2 and Free Guy? Comment below and let's talk about it. And I'll see you guys in my next review. If you like everything you see and you agree, subscribe to my channel. Join me in the Batman family. I have more Batman-tastic reviews in the way. You have been warned. Till then, ciao.